Whispers in the Woods. There were The Curse of the Forgotten Trail. It was supposed to be a simple road trip. My friends and I had been planning it for weeks. 4 days of camping, hiking, and disconnecting from the stress of our lives. We chose a remote forest in the Pacific Northwest, a place far off the beaten path where we could truly get away from it all. Little did we know, we wouldn't be alone. We arrived at the forest late in the afternoon, the sun already dipping low on the horizon. The dense canopy above us filtered the light, giving the entire area a dim, almost twilight-like quality. The air smelled of damp earth and pine, and the only sounds were the distant chirps of birds and the crunch of leaves beneath our boots. It was peaceful, serene even. But there was something off about the place, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. We set up camp near a small clearing by a creek. There were 4 of us: me, my best friend Alex, his girlfriend Emma, and her younger brother Liam. We pitched our tents, gathered firewood, and cooked dinner over the campfire. The evening passed uneventfully, filled with laughter and the occasional spooky story. None of us could have guessed that one of those stories would soon pale in comparison to the horrors we were about to face. The first sign that something was wrong came that night. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my tent. At first, I thought it was Alex, but as I listened, I realized the steps were too light, too deliberate. They circled my tent, pausing every few seconds as if whoever, or whatever it was listening for something. My heart pounded as I lay perfectly still, too afraid to move. Eventually, the footsteps faded into the forest, and I convinced myself it must have been an animal. The next morning, I mentioned the incident to the group, but no one else had heard anything. Alex teased me for being paranoid, and Emma said it was probably a deer or a raccoon. I tried to laugh it off, but I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me. As the day went on, strange things began to happen. While hiking, we came across a series of carvings on the trees, symbols that none of us recognized. They were crude, almost childlike, but there was something unnerving about them. They seemed to form a path, leading deeper into the forest. Liam, always the curious one, wanted to follow them, but the rest of us vetoed the idea. We took a few photos and moved on, trying to focus on the beauty of the forest instead of the strange markings. That evening, as we sat around the campfire, we began to hear noises coming from the woods. At first, it was just the occasional rustle of leaves or the snap of a twig. But then we heard whispers. They were faint, barely audible, but unmistakable. It sounded like multiple voices, speaking in hushed tones just beyond the tree line. Alex called out, thinking it might be another group of campers, but there was no response. The whispers stopped, leaving an oppressive silence in their wake. We decided to turn in early, hoping that a good night's sleep would calm our nerves. But sleep did not come easily. Throughout the night, we heard more noises, footsteps, whispers, and once the distant sound of something metallic scraping against rock. I barely slept, and judging by the dark circles under my friend's eyes the next morning, neither did they. On the 3rd day, we discovered something that made my blood run cold. While gathering firewood, Emma stumbled upon what looked like an old abandoned campsite. There was a collapsed tent, a rusted cooking pot, and scattered belongings, a torn backpack, a pair of muddy hiking boots, and a water bottle that looked decades old. But the most unsettling thing was the journal. It was lying partially buried under leaves, its pages damp and stained. Curious, we brought it back to our campsite and began flipping through it. Most of the entries were mundane, detailing hiking routes and daily activities. But the last few pages were different. The handwriting became erratic, the sentences fragmented. One entry read, "They watch from the trees, always watching. Don't follow the carvings. Don't listen to the whispers. They're not human." Another simply said, "It's too late." We stared at the journal in stunned silence. Emma tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably a prank, but none of us really believed that. We debated whether to pack up and leave, but Alex insisted we stay. He didn't want to cut the trip short over what he called silly stories. That night, everything came to a head. The whispers started again, louder this time, and closer. We sat around the campfire, clutching flashlights and trying to convince ourselves it was just the wind. But then we saw them. Figures moving among the trees, just beyond the firelight. They were tall and thin, their limbs unnaturally long, and their movements jerky, almost insect-like. Their eyes reflected the firelight, glowing faintly in the darkness. Panic set in as we realized they were circling us, their movements growing bolder with each passing moment. Alex grabbed a branch from the fire, waving it toward the figures, but they didn't flinch. Instead, they stopped moving, standing perfectly still at the edge of the clearing. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening, as if they were coming from inside our heads. "We need to go," I whispered, my voice shaking. The others nodded, too terrified to argue. We quickly packed what we could and doused the fire, plunging the clearing into darkness. Using our flashlights, we began the treacherous journey back to the car. The figures didn't follow us at first, but we could feel their eyes on us, watching from the shadows. As we moved deeper into the forest, the symbols began to appear again, carved into the trees like a macabre breadcrumb trail. The whispers followed us, growing louder and more frantic. At one point, Liam screamed, claiming he felt something grab his arm, but when we looked, there was nothing there. Finally, after what felt like hours, we reached the car. We threw our bags in and sped away, not daring to look back. The whispers didn't stop until we were miles away from the forest. In the weeks that followed, we tried to put the experience behind us, but it was impossible. We all began having nightmares, dreams of the figures, of the symbols, of the whispers. Emma swore she saw one of the figures standing outside her window one night. Alex started hearing the whispers in his apartment, even when he was alone. I don't know what we encountered in that forest, but I know it wasn't human. The carvings, the whispers, the figures, they were warnings, not just for us, but for anyone who dares to enter that place. We should have listened. Now it's too late.